remember a conversation that I had with my mother when I was about 8 years old. We were sitting in the kitchen, or I was sitting in the kitchen, after dinner in our Midwestern home in the United States. She was washing the dishes, and we were listening to the radio. The show had to do with something called gay rights, and I didn't know exactly what that meant at the time, but I knew it resonated with me. I looked up at my mom, and I said, "Mom, I hope that I'm not going to be gay." She looked down at me and she said, "Elizabeth, I hope you're not either." In that moment, I distinctly remember feeling uneasy and uncomfortable, not scared so much that I might be gay. To be honest, at that moment, at 8 years old, I don't think I really knew what that meant. But it was the first time that I can remember in my life that I realized that I could be seen by some people as less than others, that I might be at times considered the other. And ultimately, and I think probably most importantly to me in that moment, I realized that I could be someone that my mother was ashamed of. That conversation and many other conversations like it throughout my childhood and adolescence led me to feel alone, isolated, and unhappy. Today, I am here to propose a shift in the conversation. I think that oftentimes when we think about the conversations surrounding equality, we think of the public conversations, the conversations that we see our politicians having on television as they debate same-sex marriage, the gay rights activists who are picketing on one side of the street across from their conservative opponents. Now, those conversations are necessary and important, but they're not the conversations that I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about the conversations that we have, that you and I have on a daily basis. Because these are the conversations where we have the power to make people's lives safer and happier. Just consider for a moment if my mother had responded slightly differently to me that day. If instead of saying what she did, she had said what she said to me 10 years later when I came out to her, which was, "Elizabeth, I don't care what you are. I love you no matter what." What difference might that have made? This is the type of shift in conversation that we need to make, and the opportunities to do so are ubiquitous in our daily conversations. They range from obvious harassment and homophobia to what might seem like more benign assumed heterosexuality. We can choose what we say in those conversations. We can choose how to respond to things that have already been said, thereby shifting each one of them. Let's look at a few examples. When I was a kid, I can't tell you how many times my future boyfriends and husbands were discussed by my family and family friends. Of course, I realized at some point that wasn't what I wanted, but because of all the talk, I ended up feeling like I was going to be a huge disappointment to them all. Of course, these conversations still happen today, but we have the opportunity not to make assumptions about our kids, not to make assumptions about other people's kids. Let's wait for them to tell us who they are, who they want to date, who they want to marry. This is a type of shift in conversation we need to make. More recently, a friend's father asked me if I thought I would live in Spain forever. I told him I didn't know, and he responded by saying, "Just you wait. I have a feeling that soon you'll meet a Spanish guy, fall in love, get married, and Spain will be your home forever." I laughed, and that was it. Now, I wish he had said something more like, "Soon you'll meet someone Spanish," but he didn't, and it makes sense. But I really dropped the ball too. I didn't say what I wanted to say because I was scared of how he might respond if I said, "I doubt a Spanish husband will keep me in Spain, but maybe a Spanish wife will." This is a type of shift in conversation we need to make. I just found out about a joke that has been going on around our college campus recently, the campus where I work and teach just down the way. And it goes something like this. If a student leaves a public computer and is still signed into their Facebook account, young men who are in on the joke will go to that computer and will change that student's profile picture to a photo of two men engaged in a romantic pose. They'll also change the profile status to something along the lines of, "I'm so happy to finally be out of the closet." Today, I would like to shift that conversation with those young men. I'd like to respond by saying, I hope that you are making this joke just because you think it's funny, not realizing that in doing so, you're using homosexuality, a trait inherent to many people, as an insult. Not realizing that in doing so, you're sending the message to anyone who sees that post, regardless of their sexual orientation, the message that not only is being gay something to be ashamed or embarrassed of, but also that it's okay to make fun of being gay. I also hope that you're assuming that your words don't affect anyone. It's easy to make that assumption. We oftentimes don't hear from the people who might be affected by our jokes. But I assure you that your words are heard and they are felt. This is the type of shift in conversation that we need to make. I could go on, but I hope you get the idea. I hope you see or are starting to see that the opportunities for us to shift the conversation are many in everyday conversations that we experience. That said, I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that this shift in conversation that I'm proposing is not always easy. There can be a very real and valid fear in letting go of a conversation that you have always had in a certain way. It can take bravery and courage to change the conversation, to shift the conversation, to shift your conversation around these subject matters. Even for me, someone who has been having this conversation for many years. When the opportunity arose for me to submit an idea for this particular TEDx event, and the theme was announced, Changing Currents, I immediately knew that this is what I wanted to propose. There wasn't a moment's hesitation. Until I actually started to think about submitting the talk, people reading it, potentially being selected, and then having to stand on this stage and deliver the talk to you today. And not only did I hesitate, but I panicked. I worried about personal and professional backlash. I considered the fact that once you give a TED Talk, you can't take it back. I found myself trying to talk myself out of this topic's relevance. But of course, this topic is still relevant. And for me, there was no better indication than the fact that I was scared out of my mind to do it. Me, someone who has been coming out for 20 years, who has a supportive network of family and friends, who lives in Spain, a country where homosexuality is not a crime, where same-sex marriage is legal, where I run no risk of standing on this stage and being imprisoned and put to death simply because I am acknowledging to you all that I happen to be gay. So yes, this topic is still relevant, and this conversation, unfortunately, still needs to happen. So here I am. A little bit older than that scared kid on the kitchen floor, a little bit braver, a little bit more experienced, certainly comfortable with who I am, but still with a hint of the same fear. You know, I talked to my mom about that conversation several years after it happened, and she assured me that what she said had nothing to do with homophobia, that that's not where it was coming from, but rather that it was coming from a place of knowing that my life would be harder if I happened to be gay. And that makes sense. No parent wants their child's life to be any harder than it needs to be. And she was right. Being gay can make life harder. And as much as she may want to, she can't go back and change what she said to me that day. None of us can change conversations that we've had in the past. But we can all choose what we say next. To our families, to our friends, to our coworkers, to strangers, to children, and to all of the kids sitting on the kitchen floor today. And so, starting today, starting now, I implore you to pay attention to the conversations that you witness and are a part of. And in that next conversation, I challenge you to hesitate before making that homophobic joke, or before laughing at it, or before staying silent when you should really speak up. And finally, I encourage you to take a hold of that opportunity and to choose to shift the conversation. Thank you very much.